Rene Girard was a French philosopher who's most famous for what is now referred to as the Mimetic theory. And it is essentially a theory in five major parts. Although when people refer to the mimetic theory, they're usually referring to either mimetic desire itself or this sort of emergent scapegoat mechanism that comes from mimetic desire and conflict. Mimetic desire, um, well, I should say, desire itself, according to Girard, is mimetic or imitative. All desire, that is, according to Girard, is mimetic or imitative. So anything beyond the basic instinctual need, uh, food, water, sex, winning through these sort of animal instincts, anything beyond that, what shoes I want, even who I want as a partner, all of these things, according to Girard, are imitative in nature. And he goes into great depth through a series of his books about uh, exactly what that dynamic looks like between the subject, the mediator, and the object of desire. But essentially, the subject sees the mediator of desiring an object and then imitates that desire, cuts out the mediator, so to speak, and just desires that object. However, oftentimes two people will desire the same thing because of any number of reasons, perhaps chief among them a limited amount of resources or desirable objects. Two people will desire the same thing, or more typically, one person will desire first. That desire will be mimetic, so the subject will imitate the model, and then the subject and the model will become rivals if they are close enough to compete. You could imagine, though, that there are plenty of situations where the mediator is so far removed, maybe a daughter imitating her mother being a lawyer, that they're actually not going to compete. The daughter's never going to become a rival in that moment. However, something like this, where two friends are sort of competing for the same outcome, right? They then become desires and they imitate their pursuit of the same object. If one person starts training more for the marathon or the triathlon, the other person's going to mirror that effort and maybe, try to one up them because they were one up themselves. This then for Girard, this the fact that desire is imitative, that is going to sort of spread, and that people are going to compete because they're imitating the desire or the pursuit of the same objects. This leads to sort of all against all. In Girard's opinion, it's inevitable that competition will break out and that it'll become mimetic or begin to spread. At some point he figured if that's the case, then there would be no societies at all. We would have just sort of all fallen into competition. Something must have emerged, or we must have figured something out that would have relieved the pressure. And what he comes up with is that eventually we figured out that instead of making it all against all, it was more advantageous for the group to make it all against one. And so you have the emergence of a scapegoat mechanism. This is usually where people stop with Girard, but he goes much further in Violence and the Sacred, and he describes the actual religious element here, where if a community does fall into mimetic conflict and the entire community is sort of rivaling each other, or sides of the community are rivaling each other, and they do pick a scapegoat, they do blame one person for it, and they kill that person. If it works, and peace is at least temporarily, falls over the community, then they will think that they're actually communing with God. Uh, and then the very final thing, and Girard's opinion is that almost all ancient religions and mythologies, subscribe to this. He then looks at the Judeo Christian tradition as a deliverance from this. This is sort of an escape option. Instead of being on the side of victims and sacrifice, I'm sorry, instead of being on the side of the sacrificers, the Christian revelation and the Judeo-Christian story is really on the side of the victims.